Should be going.
I think it is. Something just happened on my.
Are we live?
Yeah, we are.
There we go.
All right, hey.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is going to be awesome. We've got a lot of nerd stuff to get out.
All right, this did work. Great. All right, welcome everyone to episode 4 of the Rebel Finance Podcast.
The UAP edition, don't forget.
Oh, I like UAP edition. We got to definitely get into that. Hopefully, the ETF I filed for UFOD will have some good stuff. Let's start off though with the market here. We actually have green today, which is a little bit unique, something we're not really used to. My comment on it is pretty simple. I mean, we're still in a downtrend. You need to be extremely cautious. Downtrends like we've seen do not reverse in one day. I mean, could we rally up to the 200-day moving average on SPY? Maybe that wouldn't be surprising. But certainly Trump and Bessent are communicating to you exactly what they want to do. You could argue that what they're doing is bad. You can argue what they're doing is not going to work, but you should not be caught off guard. Trump, I think a lot of his detractors think he's just a moron with the stuff he says. When he said, a few days ago, I'm not watching the stock market, people went off on him. He's telling you something. What he's telling you is he's not Trump 1. Trump 1, the stock market was his report card. Trump 2, he wants to bring interest rates down. He knows he's got 4 years, and he knows the market's not going to go up 4 years in a row. So get the pain over with now, restructure things the way he wants to restructure it, and then move on. As an investor, I mean, I wouldn't be selling everything now that you haven't, but, listen to us on this podcast, read the Heat Formula newsletter. Jeremy and I both have been telling you to be careful for quite some time. Again, yeah, we could get a little rally up. I do not think this is over. Jeremy, your thoughts on the market here?
Agreed. I think we're going to still continue to see some volatility. About the only thing that could maybe bring a big relief rally is like if Putin and Zelensky come to the bargaining table for a ceasefire and actually pull it off. Other than that, I don't really see a whole lot of really good opportunity other than sideways, which I do like too. I can sell lots of options in there, but on the contrary, I know that a lot of people are going to be the more investor type, buy and hold, or occasionally sell covered calls on stuff. And it's important to kind of hedge yourself in this kind of environment, but at the same time, be prepared for opportunity. Have some dry powder handy because eventually this will turn around. It's going to take some time. You'll see some relief rallies. You can scalp a little bit if you've got the skills to be a decent swing trader, day trader. You can pull some stuff off. There's still a little bit alpha, but you kind of have to make it for yourself.
Yeah, and a preview of coming attractions. We're going to be coming out hopefully next week, and it's going to be free. An ETF model portfolio, that can give people, some guidance on how you want to build a portfolio. We're going to be, not as active as I am, and certainly Jeremy is day to day because I can't. But I'll certainly look at short term and intermediate term and trying to figure out the allocations, and and if it was out and I'm almost done with it, it's going to be pretty well hedged. So keep an eye out for that. We'll have an announcement in the newsletter hopefully next week if I can finish it over the weekend.
And I'm kind of kicking off a plug, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn something into something that that actually provides a little bit of insight into the wheel trade and just make a club out of it, and then essentially just have everything aligned with swing traders. So anytime we find opportunities to swing trade the market, like we find some movement that we expect to happen, and we can always put our price targets out. We know pretty much where they're at. Align that to option selling, and you can generate a little bit of compounding in this mess. I mean, it's going to be pretty volatile. It's going to have lots of range. Might as well do something to take advantage of it. So that's the whole point.
For those who don't know, just briefly, what is the wheel trade? How do you do a wheel trade?
Yeah, definitely got to explain that a little bit better. So it's essentially waiting for whatever equity you're running the strategy on to hit support, kind of at the bottom. Sell some cash secured puts there, and then when price returns for mean reversion or up to a resistance point, if you're long equity at that point or have been assigned or purchase shares at the bottom, you can go and sell covered calls as well. So it's just a rinse and repeat. Roll the wheel, sell puts, sell calls, sell puts, sell calls as the market goes through its impulses. It's a little more complicated than that. There's certainly some stuff to learn, but in the sense of the thing, once you've got the hang of it, and really, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to learn it. It's like riding a bike. You're just pedaling along and riding the waves.
Pretty cool. All right. So we have a special guest on today. It's cool. We're going to be talking about the UFO stuff, I hope. So those of you who don't know, we filed for a UFO disclosure ETF, and I'll just kind of set the stage for that briefly, and then we can get to Lior. Basically the idea is if, and it is obviously a big if, we are sitting on game-changing energy technology, and it does end up getting disclosed and be available for commercial use, that will be a game changer like nothing we've ever seen before. Those of you who went through, the internet boom, that was a game changer. AI right now, I would argue, is a game changer. This would be light years beyond all of that. And if it does happen, we'll have an ETF to take advantage of it. So we will see. So Pat, do you want to go ahead and introduce Lior?
Hey, so this is Lior Herman. He is in Tel Aviv, Israel right now. One of my favorite places. He runs Type 5 VC. He's a space tech expert. I have his deck right here that he sent me a minute ago, and I just want to read a couple of the highlights. From 2020 to 2030, we project a 7x increase in global space investment, surpassing 160 billion annually. At least by 2025, at least 15 major declassified reports are expected, talking about UAPs. And then, he had a chart that talked about propulsion patents, and like 2020, there was like 100, expected to be like 1,000 by 2030, right? So, Leo, why don't you take it from there? Tell us what you know. It happens to be the day of the SpaceX launch to go save the astronauts. I'm very excited about that. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit too.
Sounds good. Thank you, Pat, and thank you guys for the opportunity. So, yes, there is an inflection point in space. I mean, I guess up until the early 20, say 15 years ago, early 2000, when Elon Musk got into space, everybody thought that he's pretty much insane. He's going to lose all of his tech money on space cowboy adventure. Fast forward today, he's dodging the government from federal waste of trillions of dollars that went for nobody knows exactly where. Having said that, together with Trump 1 and Trump 2, referring to the beginning of this call, during Trump 1 term, there was an issuing of patents on Google available for public disclosure, involving new crafts that are using mass reductions, energy devices that are exploiting quantum vacuum spaces and other exotic technologies. All of those seems to be seems to be a science fiction before Trump 1 term. And now, together with people like Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, and other respectable bipartisan officials, we are officially talking about disclosure of UEP in the House, but that's not the major event. The major event that I see is that the US government is openly say, hey, we have a secret Cold War here, that it's not about nuclear anymore. It's about reverse engineering tech not made by men. And the first country that's going to put their hands on this tech is going to make it trillions of dollars, and we want the US to lead that revolution. So for me, that's the biggest statement, because if we are in a race with other nations, if it's disclosed and being talked in the House by two parties, it's no more a side talk. It's no more, however you want to call it. It's a legitimate discussion led by the country officials. So bringing that to the forefront, I think, is the opening statement from my end. But take it from here, Pat.
Matt, you
Yeah,
look like you want to say something.
Well, hold on. I got a question, because I think what you brought up is, well, I mean, extremely interesting, but something maybe I had not thought of. So you think that, reverse engineering this technology right now is a race? You don't think that we've already done it? You think that we're still trying to, I mean, my sense has been we've had this since the 40s and probably would have figured it out by now. Are you saying that we haven't yet?
So there's an inflection point, because how the government usually works, and take Apple for example. Everybody knows the famous story of Steve Jobs arriving to Xerox PARC, watching the beautiful GUI interface and get his eureka moment that it's going to change personal computing forever. Now, a lot of people used to think that Xerox is, an R&D arm of, the printing firm, but it's not. It's basically a patent commercialization office that is tied to the US government in some point. And what I'm trying to reach is that there is a path between learning the technology, maybe reverse engineer it, maybe implement it to some extent in some projects, off the books or on the books, and then commercialize it and make it publicly available and becoming commercially available. So I think we are in an inflection point of that. So for your question, I think we got some of this tech, maybe not all of it. I think it definitely represents new paradigm shifts and new challenges in computation, in material science, in manufacturing, in other fields, and as a lot of smart people from the US government already say, we need more brain power to solve those challenges. So yes, we got this tech, but to make it publicly and widely spread, we need to move beyond the veil of, let's call it, national security, secrecy, whatever, and then make it part of our arsenal, so other adversarial countries will not reach there first, and we all know who those rivals are.
I mean, I would assume China, Russia. Do you think anybody else?
So let's
Klingons?
take an analogy that the UAP is Klingon's funny statement, because it's a global phenomenon. So we know about other countries that have discussed this topic. Japan has discussed this topic as well. Italy, Spain. It's a worldwide phenomena. Obviously, it's not limited to one or other country. So the innovation can come from anywhere at this point. And there is a delicate line between an innovation and national security. We wanna use some of this tech for benefiting our economy, for benefiting our defense systems, but we don't want to have an innovation that can jeopardize national security. So there is a fine line here.
One more question, and then I'll let the other guys jump in, but I don't want to forget this. So I've always had the assumption that we were holding this technology back, not for national security concerns, but because there are powerful interests like, the oil companies, for example, that don't want this out. Because if this if the energy technology gets released and is available for commercial use, that pretty much makes the oil companies bankrupt overnight. Would you agree with that, or do you think that it's more just been a national security concern and getting stuff ready for commercial use?
So I think obviously it's a mixture of interest, and I think that the oil industry today is not where it was 20 years ago. Today, take countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, for example, their economy is completely developed. They're modern, they're innovative. They're not just investing in their oil industry. They have electric cars investment. They have huge tech sectors. They have other fields that they're advancing even more than Western countries to some extent. So I think in the past, yes, it was a big issue, but we do want to remember two things. First of all, the notion that the oil economy will not stay forever has been with us for the past 20, 30 years
Right.
now, and I think that we're reaching a point where those oil companies know that there's going to be alternative sources. There's going to be like a hybrid network of electricity and power sourcing. And by the way, the oil industry itself is not depending only on cars and transportation. There's other fields that are using oils for manufacturing, for synthesizing, for material science. So there's going to be some left. It's not going to kill the industry overnight, for sure. But yeah, it's going to make a wave, and the petrodollar system is going to change, and we'll have to evolve eventually if we want to survive the big change. Just like you have people here, still using horses, but they're not being ride to work on the 101 every morning.
So let me
See,
interject.
Pat, I told you, Pat, you got to stop riding that horse. Go get yourself a Tesla.
I'm scared on horses, bro. Trust me, you don't want me on a horse. So I mean, that's a serious question, and I know this is hard to not sound like humorous or whatever. But so, Matt, Lior, you're saying that you believe a UFO crash landed somewhere in America, let's say New Mexico, and in the 40s, we went down there and found some cool ass shit. And now we're kind of holding it back because we're afraid it's going to do all sorts of weird stuff to whoever. And then now we're trying to bring it out. Is that kind of what you're saying? Just to be clear, because I'm not kidding.
So let's look at the timeline. Back in the 40s and 50s, UFOs were considered a joke or fringe, or even a loony kind of conversation. Push forward to the 60s, 70s, there was kind of like a quiet period, I would say. But towards the end of 70s and 80s, you'd start to see more respectable science, government officials, aerospace engineers, and other officials coming forward and say, "Hey, we are working on stuff somewhere in the desert, somewhere in the middle of nowhere." And it was still considered as a gibberish for some years, but then moved towards the early 2000s. Something happened. The disclosure, the terminology, kind of took a turn from a fringe talk into a lobby to a lobby. So I think that it's a reason to believe that yes, those things occurred, and you have people from the military, from the tech industry, from aerospace that says, hey, every gadget that you see since World War II, every advances that we made, whether it's fiber optics, semiconductors, projectiles, lasers, they're all results of reverse engineering. You have dozens and dozens of people who are saying the same thing and are willing to testify under oath. So,
okay, I'm down.
Yeah.
All right, Jeremy, what you got, man?
Wait, hold on, Pat. Let me answer your question from my end. So
sorry.
Yeah. So here's what I think. And again, I mean, I've got no proof, no insight or anything, but interestingly, Roswell in 1947 had the only military base that had nuclear weapons. So imagine you're, from another place, and we detonate a nuclear bomb in the late 40s, and you're like, what the heck was that? And you come and look around, you're going to go to Roswell. So, I think that whole situation where it was reported, it was a UFO. Oh, wait, no, it was a weather balloon. And then that intelligence agent came out years later and said, well, no, it was a UFO. They told me, and an Army intelligence officer is not going to know the difference. That's ridiculous. So yeah, I think we've been sitting on that technology for a while. I think 2017, you started to see the government start to get interested in disclosure, because that's when the New York Times broke that story with Lou Elizondo, the whistleblower, who maybe is a whistleblower, maybe he's not, who knows. But also the videotape of the Tic Tac and the fighter pilots flying around. Last year, we had David Grush, another whistleblower, testify in front of Congress that we've had a retrieval program for decades. News Nation ran a story a few weeks ago where another whistleblower who supposedly was on a retrieval team, and then any day now we're getting a movie Age of Disclosure, which supposedly has a lot of high up people saying, yeah, I mean, this stuff is real. So, that's my sense.
I think that was my
Okay.
computer.
Oh, Jeremy, so you got anything?
A little bit of a nerd side note or two. I kind of I come from an automotive background, so I mean I'm of course a huge fan of Toyota, and I've been following them. We mentioned not too long ago that Elon went and visited their development center, and he was like notably shaken by what he saw. And come to find out, I actually found something. I was digging around a little bit on YouTube into this a little bit, and one of their partner companies is essentially developing an engine that runs on a mixture of like 2% hydrogen and ammonia. And if you didn't know, ammonia is flammable. If it has the right accelerator, it'll burn just as fast as gasoline. So when you mention like big oil kind of suppressing different types of energy production that can be also clean for the environment, that's one of them that I nerd out on, because those things are known. I mean, the X5 test plane that was out of that area in the Skunk Works there was the first one to really set the absolute speed record, and it ran on ammonia and oxygen. I mean, it's a fairly clean burning thing. So you go in to look at how some of the stuff is suppressed, and that's essentially it. I mean, there's not as much profit in ammonia. It's practically free from a farm. We produce so much of it; it's insane. Go into reverse engineering stuff from a UFO crash, and there's plenty of other things that kind of make you scratch your head. I mean, theoretically, it would have taken us a lot longer to figure out a transistor, let alone the converter inverter that uses massive transistors to run hybrid engines and stuff like that. It's phenomenal what you can do with that. And then the whole concept of they've discovered a previously undiscovered form of magnetism, which is intriguing. If you want to nerd out and dig into that stuff, energy is going to blow your mind with what you can do with some of that stuff. So now we've got propulsion systems on the horizon here that can get us to places and do things, and everything is just kind of opening up as if we're.
Let's go straight to that. Wait. Let's go straight to that, Lior. So tell me about propulsion. Go into propulsion.
Propulsion. Let's talk about something interesting. Everybody knows you spoke about geeking out. The term from Star Trek. Warp. Let's warp out. Drive. I think it was 2 years ago that DARPA, that everybody knows that the U.S. R&D agency, have proven that they've created a lab-sized warp bubble. And
lab-sized what?
Warp bubble.
Warp bubble.
Warp bubble in a lab. What it essentially means is that they created a very small space that is basically has its own physics forces around it. It's not part of regular space. And if you apply to that warp bubble quantum mechanics, things like entanglement, non-localities, things that we already know in communication and in waveforms that can change locations with change of frequency, and you apply that to a warp bubble, you got a warp drive. So what we need now, we need to have a bigger bubble, not a miniature DARPA experiment that can warp up an enterprise-sized ship, for example, and then you can literally use this known physics now and known engineering now to move a vessel between places.
Yeah.
So
I'm there,
2 years,
man.
so 2 years ago we moved from something that sounds like a complete nonsense in sci-fi channel to an engineering problem that all we need now is a bigger frame, if you will, of this bubble and a bigger conducive elements to basically to build vehicles that can use this type of technology. So we are on the threshold of moving from science fiction into engineering and research and development. And there's actually venture capitals and R&D firms already investing in this propulsion system in exploiting and learning how they can do it better and bigger and smarter, basically.
Okay, so good. That's a good segue here. So let's talk about like the space launches. So SpaceX is going up today. I mean, to save the astronauts in theory. And we have who just
Probably
failed
not
last
in
week.
theory.
Well, yeah. Well, hopefully they save. And then we
I
have
think they're actually trying to save the astronauts.
My bad. And then you have Firefly, who just had a successful lunar mission on March 2nd. So that's kind of segue into our publicly traded companies. But tell me about what you think about that, Lior? Like, the SpaceX or Firefly. I mean,
I think that
where's
this
that
is
going?
amazing. It's an amazing time for low Earth orbit and the lunar Earth economy. You have companies like Quantum Space. If you know that company, they're deploying space relays and basically establishing the communication for the lunar economy. That's a term already. So I think that what's happening with Firefly and other rocket manufacturing, obviously SpaceX, is that the capabilities are increasing to the point where we are shifting from a small vehicles into Starship-like transportation that can take a big loads into orbit and into the lunar surface, and that will create basically a new economy. And in recent year we have I think on average every day almost 2 launches a day. In 1 year you have more than the space program took in their entire lifespan. So you can see that the sea change is already happening on the ground or above.
So, go ahead.
I was going to nerd out some more, so it might take a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go. I'm trying to formulate a question, so nerd out some more.
So I've also been kind of looking at. I love science. I love exploring things on my own, and just it's something that it excites me to do. I love it so much. I'm just learning stuff. Even particle entanglement, which no one's going to read an article about that, but I do. But you go into putting things on the moon, and the first hurdle is always going to be infrastructure, as well as how that infrastructure is going to be implemented in the environment. I mean, the temperature swings alone on the surface of the moon are absolutely lethal. But there's been kind of fairly recent discoveries of remembering that the moon was once vulcanized, and there's lava tubes on the moon, and it would require so much less infrastructure to just cap off 2 ends of a tunnel, and voila, you've got a habitat that's not on the surface, not in those temperature swings. Relative temperatures stable at about 63 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. That's comfortable. I mean, that's like having your biodome just a little bit underground. The only thing that they've really got to look into is how stable these tubes are. Are they going to be safe from caving in and stuff like that? Because there is seismic activity up there. But the other thing that really needs to come out of that is we need to kind of figure out if there's actually water ice anywhere on the moon, because that's going to be a key ingredient in both making oxygen for people to survive and making fuel.
So there is, and we know a company from Type 5, a company called Heliospace, that they've created a reactor to basically generate oxygen from the moon regolith, basically by creating an electrolysis process from the regolith, the lunar surface, and separate the hydrogen into oxygen, and by doing so created oxygen generator for the lunar surface. And we know another company called WeSpace that actually developing a rover to explore the lava tubes that you just mentioned in order to find the habitat zones and places that can be covered by domes and can be later on be, bases or research areas.
Very, very
Yeah,
cool.
so you have tech companies actually working and being, they get capital to actually solve those challenges as we speak. So, we're a few years from seeing those companies becoming unicorns, going for IPOs, becoming an M&A targets. It's not just, we're not just geeking out here. We're actually looking at the next, the next wave of tech that is involving both, hardware and software after many years that it been purely software based.
All right,
Are any of these
go ahead.
companies public now? So, I mean, I think of Rocket Lab, I think of ASTS.
Intuitive Machines, they had a failed moon mission. Their stock just got crushed. LUNR. There's Planet Labs. They specialize in Earth imaging. Spire Global. Their data and analytics. There are names out there. I don't know if any of them are super exciting.
You bring up a really unique point. I think that the space economy is still defaulting on investment vehicling, and we've been exploring with Type 5 some structures like AMC, which is a tradable asset certificate, and also convertible bonds for buying, bonds for space space startups. The idea is that when you look at space investment, sometimes the caveat, the risk is more than the typical cycles of a venture capitals or a private equity firm. So they need basically a recycle mechanism. So when you look at the markets and ETFs and other publicly instruments, I think that in the next year or two, we're going to see some creative structuring like convertible bonds, like ETFs that will basically be able to exploit those technologies, those firms, before they reach the inflection point, before they reach into the private equity buyout point.
Matt, pull up ASTS chart here. ASTS. So UBS just put a target on that this week of like 38.5. Stock's like at 26. It's gotten crushed since like February. I thought that was interesting.
I mean, this one looks like a double top to me.
Yeah.
I'd be careful with this one. I don't know, Jeremy. What do you think of ASTS here?
I would be a buyer at about $14. I could see this pulling back pretty quick. But it's going to be like that. I mean, we're going to see,
Right.
similar to the nuclear theme. I mean, everybody jumped in and then realized, oh, wait, no, it's going to take about 10 years just to get started and probably 20 before we make money. So, yeah, it's going to take a little while to do this stuff. But once it's there and being implemented, the resources that are available on the moon, that's just a small speck compared to what's out there in the asteroid belt. I mean,
Jeremy, let me segue here. You segue to something I want to say, right? The moon and asteroids are believed to contain vast quantities of resources, including helium-3, rare earth elements, and water ice. Helium-3, for instance, is considered potential for future nuclear fusion. There's a company out there named Astroforge, trying to become the first commercial entity to mine asteroids. What do you think about that, Lior? Mining asteroids.
That's a something that everyone are passionate, curious about, and I think that the elements of the moon, there was a research done by a US company a few years ago to map out the entire geostructure of the moon, and they did found helium-3 and other rare elements that if you bring them to Earth, if you can utilize them for manufacturing, they're going to be worth trillions of dollars. So I think we're only a years away from having a space mining
How many
company.
years?
3 or 4 years. And I'll give you an example. There is a company called Varda. Yeah, Varda Space. It was founded
VARDA.
Yeah, it was founded by a group of entrepreneurs led by Peter Thiel from Silicon Valley. Everybody knows.
Yeah.
And they're still working on orbital missions and manufacturing in the close proximity for Earth. But I think for a company like Varda to move to the next phase and do more of a wider spectrum of things like maybe mining operations or supporting mining operations. It's something that we would see happening because they already have the launching infrastructure. They already have the knowledge of operating space missions, and they're going to be the first to exploit, vehicles, transportation, propulsion to get into, let's say, rare asteroids.
Got it. All right, so let's go to what you do. You have a space insurance company. Why don't you tell us about what that is? I mean, that seems cool.
Yeah, so on one of the projects I'm leading and involved, it's called Orbit Insure, and we're basically tapping into the space insurance market. Today, you have thousands of satellites going into orbit, whether they're for communication, for Earth observation, for many applications, not even just satellites. You have labs creating pharmaceuticals in space. I don't know if you know, there's a firm I'm working with called Space Pharma that does that. You have
Data
applications that
centers
are
in space.
what?
Data centers in space.
Data centers in space. You have hardware, but much more than that. You have downstream. Downstream is basically all the data that goes back to Earth and the dependencies of this data, whether this is, real estate companies, governments looking at GIS data. You have, financials depending on ATMs, on Swift cards. You have logistics depending on locations. So all of these downstream applications, if something happens to them by either jamming or disturbance or lack of service, there is not yet an insurance marketplace that can pull up a solution for them. And as these products and applications grow, you got to adapt. So I'll give you an analogy. Cyber insurance, right? Cyber insurance on businesses considered to be a fringe, maybe for a government or very expensive law firm a few years ago, but now every SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses, are considered to have a cyber insurance for, ransomware, hacking, or something else. Data loss, just the same thing. If you're running a big logistics firm and you are depending on location services, downstream data, linking some IoT devices to send information to the cloud and using space, you're gonna need insurance. We're talking about a market that is going to reach $1 trillion, according to McKinsey, by the end of this decade. So if you extrapolate the amount of insurance policies that you would need for working, managing, and operating equipment in space and down to Earth, that's what Orbit Insure is developing. We're creating an AI based assessment tool that helps basically the underwriters and the brokers to optimize their policy, to mitigate risks, and to find the best deals for the clients. Something that today only the big insurance companies can do. But again, as the market grows, you need more room for underwriters, brokers, and to reach to the long tail of customers that are involving with the chain of space. So that's what Orbit Insure is doing for as an essence.
Okay, I thought Matt, you were going to say something, but I will just note that there is pre-launch insurance, there's launch insurance, there's in-orbit insurance, there's third-party liability insurance. So there's a lot, quite a bit, seemingly a big need for this. Axis is doing the biz, Munich Re's in the biz, Lloyd's of London in the biz. So it's out there. So
yeah,
what I found interesting that it's a premium for launch insurance can range between 15 to 25% of the satellite's total value. Is that about right? I mean, it's a pretty big number, or yeah?
Yeah,
Does that
exactly.
seem like a big number? Is that a big number? I don't know. Is that a big number? What do you
It's a
think,
big
Matt?
number.
You're in insurance.
It's a big number.
I'm not in insurance.
You were in insurance.
I would, but not this insurance. I did actually write about why you should add property and casualty insurers to your portfolio in today's newsletter. I did not realize you could also get property and casualty insurance on your satellite. So
yeah, you actually can, and another Silicon Valley entrepreneur, Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, is developing a company that trying to track and tackle the space debris issue. So space debris is a huge risk factor for insurance. And one of the solutions that we are building in Orbit Insure is it's called replacement in space insurance. So if something happened in orbit, some failure happened for the hardware, or a space collision from a piece of debris, and you got to have some risk management for your constellation, whether it's a single satellite, a cluster of satellites. The replacement in space, yeah, as you mentioned, is something that you got to protect. Otherwise, you can lose an entire line of business, and sometimes it can be fatal for your market. And it's something that companies on the private sectors will not be able to cope with. Maybe a government, if Lockheed losing a satellite, it's fine. They have backups. They have their own federal funds to build another one. But if you're a private venture company and you already have a back-to-back leasing agreements with clients, and you losing your payload in space, you got to have insurance to provide a fast recovery.
Is that biz up and running right now?
Yes, my partner, the CEO of Orbit, has been involved with space insurance for over 30 years, working with companies like Lloyd's that you mentioned, and Beasley and others. So it's a
You have a
working
web address or
solution.
anything? You want to just shout it
Yeah.
out here?
Yeah, it's orbitinsure.space, and anyone who's interested can leave us a note, and we do it on an embedded insurance solution for now, and we're building our own platform. So it's
All
open.
right, Jeremy,
for
now it's
calls.
your
Yeah,
turn,
sure.
boss. I'm taking over here.
Well,
So,
I just, Pat, thank you for pointing that out, because I'm sure that most of our listeners have their own satellite, so this will be perfect.
well, you never know. But all right, so let's go to.
You don't never know. Yeah, you have no idea.
All right, so let's pull up Lockheed Martin, LMT. Let's pull up that chart.
And while you do that, I mean, it's rough up there. There's a lot of stuff going on, and not even I mentioned something that I monitor for my trading is coronal mass ejections. I mean, that can do a lot of harm. I have a little widget on my toolbar down at the bottom of my screen where if I'm day trading stuff, and sometimes I'm in and out of stuff in a few seconds, with enough size where if I'm cut off from communications, it can hurt me. So I'm always watching things like solar weather. I always pay attention to where if things are a little bit risky, I won't trade that day, quite literally. That's just one factor. And you get into low Earth orbit, there is so much stuff up there. It's like a cloud if you've ever seen it on a radar. It's nuts how much stuff is in orbit. And that's stuff we know about.
All right, Jeremy, LMT.
I'm looking at it.
Known for its Skunk Works division, which develops classified aerospace technologies, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I want to point something about Lockheed. In 2020, during COVID, when disclosure first started, I started to look at the Lockheed stock, and it seemed to be quiet for a while, but then it started to pick up, and just before the recent down that we have in past month or so, the stock was actually doubled since COVID times to what was it like I think it was.
It hit a low during COVID of 232.55.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It almost doubled since then.
Exactly, and that just
actually
you have wars, you have geopolitics instability, and you have disclosure. What happened if the Skunk Works will launch let's say a mass reduction triangular shape craft for the Space Force, a contract? What would that do for the stock in 1 week?
Wasn't there just a picture out like this week of up here? It's actually up the street from me, Lancaster, where they had a big Lockheed thing wrapped in this white like plastic thing, and it looked triangular shaped. And everyone was like, "That's
supposedly the a lot of the triangular UFOs are actually Lockheed."
Yeah. Yeah, and you got people from Space Force explaining that the whole reasons for Space Force is from moving from acquisition, so-called, into development. So you already have kind of like the hints of where this conversation is leading, and the stock price is also heading in the same way.
I got a shout out to my stepfather on this, because he's been talking about this stuff for years. I've always thought he was crazy. All right, how about Northrop Grumman, NOC?
was going to say I have a friend who worked for Lockheed, and that was a lot of stuff he couldn't tell me.
Yeah, I got a lot.
You
I
know,
have
you
several.
know, you know, Lou Elizondo says something interesting about you. You mentioned Northrop and and Lockheed. He said, let's say that company A had an advantage and company B didn't have that advantage. So company A lost a lot of money and had to fire a lot of employees, and company B became, won a multi-billion-dollar contract with the, with the government. So if you're looking at Northrop comparing to Lockheed, maybe that was company B.
Short
I'm not
Northrop,
sure.
long Lockheed. That's asymmetric risk right there for you, Matt.
There you
That's
go.
a
Yeah,
plug.
but it looks like they've both done. I mean, this one COVID low was 242. It's now 491. I mean, double
Yeah, it's similar. It's similar to Lockheed. So you can't know, and
similar.
both companies have, secret divisions and R&D. So it can be both. Probably, just like everything else, we see that companies like have like a parallel rival that they're developing similar
I mean,
technologies.
Raytheon is quadruple. Raytheon was 35.93 at the lows, and now it's 130. So that one has done the best.
How about
Yeah.
Boeing? That's a winner.
Well, I mean, Boeing's got all sorts of issues.
Yeah, they got issues.
They're involved.
One that people rarely pay attention to is a company that manufactures a whole lot of aviation parts. It's called Textron, and
What's the
they
symbol?
I think it's
TXT.
TXT, yeah. And it's interesting because you get into this type of stuff, and you're like, well, who's selling the shovels and picks here? And they're kind of at a low where if we get a little bit of a test, say about $68 or so, we could see some buyers around there. We might want to keep an eye on this one.
I don't mind this. I don't mind this chart. And in just for new viewers, I mean, one of the things. So in let me kind of level set. So it sounds like we're in way early innings, maybe not in the first inning. There's a whole bunch of companies. There's a whole new area. Most of the good ones sound like they're private right now, but hopefully will be public over the next few years. And then the way we look at that is, first off, who are the winners? And those are typically going to be obvious. Then we're going to want to look at, who are the suppliers to the winners? So like
Right.
a Textron here, or if you're going to be mining asteroids or mining the moon, who are the ones doing the construction, all, and then who are the suppliers to the suppliers, and you can invest all across the ecosystem. And a lot of times what you'll find is, once the initial euphoria ends, you're doing better off in kind of those second order companies. Like, right now in AI, personally, I'm out of a lot of the semiconductors and things like that, but I'm back into the energy because regardless of who wins DeepSeek or, all the stuff out of China, we still need energy. And, I think the same thing could apply to this. You're going to get initial euphoria. Companies are going to go crazy. But then at the end of the day, whoever's providing that infrastructure, you're always going to need that. And that's what you're going to want to look for.
Absolutely.
Shovels and picks, baby.
All right, one more. SPCE. Now this has like been a disaster. This is Virgin Galactic. Why aren't people like flying into space anymore? Isn't that, Lior, tell me that. Like how do I get up into, orbit, and how much would that cost, and why is that not working, or why is that business model failed for Virgin Galactic? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that Virgin Galactic was merely looking at the space tourism economy and not too much focusing with US government and national securities and contracts that will provide stability for the company and provide a manufacturing bandwidth and runway, basically. And I think that's why the company failed. Also, from a technology perspective, I think that, kind of piggybacking an airplane was less of a favorable technology for heavy payloads. And then maybe number three is the lack of reusability of the engines and the propulsion engine, just like you have with the SpaceX rocket. So it's technology, it's delivery method, and it's government relationship. It's like you take an electric vehicle manufacturing called Better Place that was born in Palo Alto and also operated in Israel back in early 2000. They were very close to Tesla in the beginning, but they failed because they were lack of securing those both infrastructure, government, and also their delivery system was different. They were trying to swap batteries, not to have a longer range. So sometimes the technology itself can be a barrier.
So this is a question for Matt and Lior, right? So I'm getting a lot of stuff lately about SpaceX, private equity, secondary offering, blah, blah, blah. What do you make of that, Matt? I mean, would you go in there and buy SpaceX in here on a private, waiting for pre-IPO? Pre-IPO shares is what they tag it as. And what do you think of SpaceX, Lior, as just a company? Matt, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't right now just because of all the hype around it. I mean, I'd wait for Elon Musk to be even more hated and for, maybe it to go down before I'd try to get into it. There is a reason. So we have a SPAC ETF and the symbol is SPCX. And there's a reason we have that symbol, because if Elon Musk does decide, hey, I'm going to go public, that's a pretty good symbol. And he's got a lot of money and everyone's got their price. So I am sort of hoping he does go public, and I am hoping he knocks on my door about my stock symbol.
So you're hoarding stock symbols.
I mean, just like people did URLs
Email
back
address.
in the day.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now
All right.
hoarding stock symbols.
Or toilet paper a few years ago, right? Or chicken.
I didn't do that.
All right, so Lior, what do you think? What do you think about it? SpaceX. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. SpaceX. Good or bad? Any thoughts?
I would say good. There are 3 private space stations are in construction as we speak. They're talking about actually taking down the International Space Station with Elon Musk, actually to push it down, just like Iron Man did with its Marvel movies, using its propulsion to push some things away. But anyway, I think that the kind of SpaceX is gearing up for a very massive orbital operations, not only launching of satellites. There's going to be suborbital economy that nobody talks about it, continent to continent in less than an hour. Yeah, you got the private space stations, you got, the UAP thing, the lunar economy. So I think, we never know when Elon Musk is going to surprise us, and we definitely don't know when Donald Trump is going to surprise us. So if you can get your hands on some stocks, I would do it.
You would? Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
So I'll respond to this Facebook ad. Hopefully it's real, by the way. Last thing, you mentioned that you know a lot about quantum. We talk about quantum here. I think you said that, right?
Quantum physics, yeah.
Quantum.
Yeah. There's quantum physics and there's quantum computing.
Okay, well, I don't know the difference. But when you hit on that, then let these guys take over. I'll let these guys take over from here. I'll let the smart guys take over.
Yeah. So wait, I have one last question, and I thought I heard you, and I just want to clarify. So a lot of the technology and the advancements we've made since the end of World War II seem, a little too good to be true. Did I hear you right? Did you say some of this you think is reverse engineered?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have Air Force people saying that, in the dozens, not 1, not 2, not 3. Some of them are still in duty, some of them are in the military. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that I've always thought.
So you're not crazy, Matt.
That is maybe Lior and I are both crazy.
That's subjective.
Yeah.
So, all right, the quantum. Someone start. We got like 5 minutes.
So quantum computing, the market size, just to give you a hint, today is estimated to be about 1 billion by the end of last year, and projected to be 5.3 billion by 2029. So we're talking about a booming and a newborn market. So to give you like the highlight of quantum computing in in a non too technical way. So everybody knows transistors has zeros and ones, and they can store data. And quantum computers are basically work by different physics. They have both zeros and ones. So what they are actually working by is a different physics of entanglement and frequencies changes and ion traps and all these curses that are basically what they're saying is that if we can manipulate the current of quantum mechanics and implement a computerized requests for either calculations or measurements or let's say sensing different frequencies, you get to a resolution and you get to a mathematical level that classical computers using trillions of transistors can never do in 10 or 20 years, because they don't have the operating numbers or the operating let's call it schemes to even run those complex matrices, and quantum computers, they can do it. So what happens today in this industry is that it's moving really quickly from labs experiments in a huge huge rooms sized computers into the semiconductors industry. In other words, just like the mainframes became semiconductors and became in microchips, we see the same revolution happening in quantum computers, and we are going to see an integration between cloud-based system and quantum-based systems, and that's gonna basically boost some verticals, including medical research, genomics, drugs discovery, weather measurements, and of course finance, security, areas like encryptions, data encryptions. Everybody knows today that the current RSA, the state of the art security, is not longer sufficient in the age of quantum computation. So there's going to need a newer level of data encryption. So we are on the cusp of leapfrogging from, let's call it, classical computers that we have today into a hybrid quantum and classical computers in the next 5 years, which is going to change a lot of industries.
To nerd out some more,
So-
one of the breakthroughs I was looking into was the fact that there's a realization that energy transfer between two objects, like a battery and some sort of device, doesn't necessarily take place within the wires. It takes place within the fields around the wires. And that's kind of the epiphany where quantum computing even became a concept on that discovery. And now here we are, ready to, dang near, just launch it right now. It's ready to go.
Lior,
Yeah.
one last
So-
thing. All right. So you said
Wait, hold on. So how far away are we from quantum computing, and who wins, the US or China?
That's a good question. It's like asking on the semiconductors who's winning, the US or China. I think that everybody wins in the higher, but I think that the US wins first because you have companies like Microsoft launched less than a month ago their first. You can pull it off online.
No, I saw it. I wrote
a
about it in the
microchip
newsletter.
that is basically has more qubits. That it's basically like saying we have more transistors for quantum computation. So I think who's winning now is still the US, but just with OpenAI and DeepSeek, we might see in a year from now a quantum semiconductor, microchip from China that do what Google and Microsoft hasn't been accomplished yet. I'm actually working on a research that involving another hardware piece that will change how quantum computation works, and it's basically involving timing. That classical computers, they're using atomic clocks to basically synchronize all the activities. Whether it's data reading or CPU or anything that the computer does, it has a clock sequence. But in quantum physics, it's all dynamics. You cannot call a normal clock. So there is a new device today, which is called a nanoparticle accelerator. So you may have heard about CERN in Switzerland, which is a huge ring that accelerates particle, where they discovered the boson-Higgs particle. But now they try to do the same thing on a chip level. So if you can do that and you can simulate electrons and protons and connect that with quantum, you basically, it's like saying like we've got a huge airplane, but now we can steer it. Before we couldn't steer it. We just had a big airplane. So it's evolving really fast.
Plus, the amount of energy consumed in it is much lower as this development goes on.
All right, last thing, healthcare and AI quantum. I know you have a healthcare business you said you were investing in. I forgot to bring that up earlier. Matt, you can talk about the healthcare fund we've registered, right? I can talk about that, hopefully. And Lior, why don't you tell me, you said you had something going on with healthcare, right?
You mean space and
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah,
maybe it was just part of the...
Yeah, part of the space economy is also involving pharmaceutical drugs discovery. I'm working with a company, yes, called Space Pharma. They recently been evaluated in $100 million valuation. And what they do, they actually sending into the space station a miniature lab. It's called Lab on a Chip. And what they do, they actually creating tissues and crystalline structures and other drugs, substances that are later being taken down by SpaceX to the ground and being sold to companies like, Merck and Roche and other big pharma companies in order to change the densities of pharmaceutical drugs. So let me give you an example how it's affecting patients and how it's affecting the pharmaceutical market. So let's say that you have today a cancer treatment and it's been done by the veins. You have to go to the hospital taking basically a needle down your arm and sit for a couple of hours and do it for a couple of months to get your cancer therapy. So what happens if you have now a new formula that you can do it at home, just like diabetes or something, and you don't have to go to the hospital. So you can reach to thousands of more patients. Your ESG footprint goes way lower because you have less medical waste. Your profit, I leave that part for you guys. You're the expert on the financial markets. But what it does essentially, that if a drug is losing its lifespan, let's say in a 10, 12 years patent cycle, but now you have a new form that can extend the lifespan and reach to more patients and be more profitable, what that does for your market, for your big pharma, it's huge. So this company I'm working with, Space Pharma, is actually developing this type of platform using, again, lab on a chip, and eventually taking these substances to the pharmaceutical companies, helping them to reshape, reform a better drugs for patient. So, yeah.
Cool. All right, let's why don't we end it there? I mean, that was a great conversation. We'll have to have Lior back and we can go through some more of these issues. Maybe once we have disclosure too, we'll have him back.
I wish I would have spent more time in school instead of sororities, I'm thinking, after this conversation.
I think you're good, Pat.
I think
someone smart from the U.S. government said disclosure is a process; it's not an event. So I don't know if you're gonna see an event.
Oh, that makes me feel better.
Let's see how the process unfolds. Let's put it that way.
All right, later, guys. Thank you, Lior. I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.